All right, let's dive right in. In this explainer, we're going to build the ultimate playbook for tackling the risks that are hiding in every single supply chain. We're going from the big ideas right down to practical strategies you can use. So let's get to it. You've heard this a million times, right? But it's not just some old saying. It's the absolute fundamental truth of logistics. It doesn't matter how slick or advanced your operation is. Just one single point of failure can bring the entire thing crashing down. So the real question is, how do you find those weak links and shore them up before they snap?
Well, here's our game plan. First, we're going to dissect the system itself. Then we'll look at the natural stress points. From there, we'll get into specific risks, build out a playbook to manage them, and finally, we'll talk about how to design a supply chain that's really built to bend, not break.
Okay, first things first. Before we can even think about managing risk, we have to understand the machine we're dealing with. So, what exactly is a supply chain anyway?
The best way to wrap your head around it is to think of it like the human body. It's this incredibly complex, interconnected system. And just like doctors break down the body into, say, the skeletal system or the nervous system to make sense of it all, we need a framework to help us dissect a supply chain.
And lucky for us, that framework exists. It's called the SCORE model. It's pretty much the industry standard for mapping out a supply chain. And it's brilliant because it takes all that crazy complexity and breaks it down into 6 easy-to-understand process groups. And here they are, the big 6. You've got plan. That's where you map everything out. Source is where you buy all your stuff. Make, well, that's the manufacturing part. Deliver gets the product to the customer. Return is for dealing with anything that comes back. And finally, you've got enable, which is all the background stuff like IT and HR that keeps the whole thing humming along. Literally every single thing you do fits into one of these buckets.
Okay, so now we get the system. Let's look at where the stress comes from. Because risk isn't something that just pops up out of thin air. A lot of the time, it's actually created by these natural tensions inside the business itself.
See, at its heart, every supply chain is a constant balancing act. You're always making trade-offs between goals that are pulling in opposite directions. And here's a really key insight. That relentless push for cost efficiency, while it sounds like a no-brainer, it's often the very thing that creates the biggest risks, putting that drive to keep costs low in a cage match with the need to give customers amazing service. And this is the classic tug of war. The sales team, they want warehouses stuffed to the gills with inventory so they never, ever miss a sale. But the operations team, they look at that inventory and just see cash tied up and collecting dust. They want to keep things as lean as possible to be efficient. See the problem? Both teams are doing what they think is best for the business, but their goals are in direct opposition. That conflict is a huge source of risk. So let's get a little more granular and see how these big picture conflicts create very specific, very real risks in the core processes of sourcing your materials and actually making your products.
When it comes to sourcing, this obsession with cost leads to constant trade-offs. Chasing a volume discount by ordering a massive quantity looks fantastic on a purchasing report, right? But what you don't see is how it quietly bloats your inventory costs. Or locking in a sweet, low price with a long-term contract feels really safe until some unexpected event happens and you have zero flexibility. Every single move you make to save a buck has a potential and often very expensive side effect. And it's the exact same story with your manufacturing strategy. If you use a push system, you're making products based on a forecast. The risk, if that forecast is wrong, you could be sitting on a mountain of stuff nobody wants. On the flip side, with a pull system, you only make things after a customer orders it. That totally gets rid of the inventory risk, but it introduces a brand new one, losing sales because you just can't build things fast enough to keep up.
Okay, enough about the problems. We get it, we know where the risks are coming from, so how do we fight back? Well, we need a formal strategy. We need a playbook for building resilience.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? You can't predict every fire, every flood, every factory that's going to shut down. So, you don't try to. You don't prepare for a specific event. You build a system for managing uncertainty itself.
And the secret weapon, the central tool in that system, is something called a risk register. Think of it as a master list of everything that could possibly go wrong. But it's not just a list of your fears. It's a living, breathing tool for systematically identifying, analyzing, and then planning your response to any potential disruption. And building one is pretty straightforward. You use this simple 7-step method. You start with a huge brainstorm. Capture every possible risk you can think of. Then, for each one, you identify the results, like what would actually happen.
After that, you get analytical. You estimate the impact if it happens, and you figure out the probability that it'll happen. Then you analyze all that data, decide how you're going to respond, and finally, and this is crucial, you educate your team on the playbook.
Now here's where it gets really interesting. This is that analyze step in action. You take the impact score and you multiply it by the probability score to get a risk index. This super simple calculation instantly shows you where to focus your energy. Look here, a port shutdown might be more likely, but a key supplier failing, even though it's less probable, is almost as catastrophic. This index helps you spend your time and money intelligently.
So, once you've got your priorities straight, you've basically got 4 main moves you can make. For the really low-index risks, you might just accept them. For others, you can transfer the financial hit through something like insurance. You could try to avoid a risk entirely, like say by switching away from a supplier in a really volatile region. Or, and this is the most common one, you can mitigate it. You take action to make the risk less likely to happen or less painful if it does.
And that last one, mitigation, that brings us to the ultimate goal here. Because the absolute best defense against risk isn't a rigid wall. It's a supply chain that's flexible, one that's designed from the ground up to bend under pressure instead of shattering.
So when we say flexibility, what are we really talking about? It's the ability to react to change. Doesn't matter if it's a huge spike in demand or a factory shutting down, without your costs going through the roof. It means having strategic options already baked right into your system.
And you really need 2 kinds. Upside flexibility is what lets you jump on sudden opportunities. Maybe a competitor messes up or your product goes viral. It's about scaling up fast. But downside flexibility is just as critical. That's what lets you scale down efficiently when demand drops, so you're not just burning cash on warehouse space and inventory you don't even need.
So at the end of the day, it all comes down to this one question. A rigid, obsessive focus on just-in-time efficiency can create a system that's incredibly fragile. But a truly resilient supply chain, it embraces flexibility, it embraces proactive risk management, and it ensures that when, not if, disruption hits, it's ready to bend, adapt, and just keep moving forward.